Good morning, and thank you for taking part in Southern Gas Association's Natural Gas Take Action Month and for attending today's webinar, How RNG Helps to Meet Sustainability Goals, featuring Anheuser-Busch and American Natural Gas. We hope that everyone is safe and healthy during this unique time, and we appreciate your commitment to partnering with us to help change the narrative around natural gas. The purpose of federal and state antitrust statutes is to assure the preservation of a free and competitive economy. To achieve this end, these laws embody a general prohibition against any agreement or combination among competitors which has the effect of unreasonably restraining trade. It is the policy of SGA to conduct its activities in strict compliance with all applicable federal and state antitrust laws and to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Please note that we've muted all attendees upon arrival today to reduce the background noise, since we acknowledge that most of our audience is still currently working from home. As you guys know, we're all relying more and more on technology and webinar platforms. Technology is great, but in the rare event that you lose connection, do not worry. SGA is recording today's webinar, and a link to the recording will be sent out within the next few days. If at any point throughout today's session you have a question for one of our speakers, you can send your question or comments through the questions option found on your control panel. And now I would like to introduce Judd Cook, Director of Gas Operators at Dominion Energy, to introduce and welcome today's speakers. Judd?
Thank you, Nicole. We want to express our sincere appreciation to our presenters today. We have Brian Berry from American Natural Gas and Angie Slaughter with Anheuser-Busch. Thank both of you for joining us today and being willing to share your expertise and your experience with us. As Brian is our first presenter, I'll go ahead and introduce him. Brian Berry is a clean energy veteran with over 20 years of experience as an innovator, engineer, and business leader. As Chief Revenue and Sustainability Officer, he is responsible for ensuring alignment and coordination across key lines of business. In addition to this, Brian leads American Natural Gas renewable energy and sustainability efforts, focused both on helping customers and ANG decarbonize operations through adoption of sustainable business practices, use of renewable fuels, energy efficiency, and use of renewable sources of electric generation. With that, I'll go ahead and turn the time over to Brian. Thanks, Brian.
Oh, thank you, Judd. Thank you to the SGA team for inviting me to join the webinar today. It's a real pleasure to join everyone. I'm joining from far upstate New York, Saratoga Springs. I'm fortunate to be in the office. Otherwise, you'd be hearing a significant amount of background noise from the children that are trying to do schooling at home today. So I'm fortunate to be able to be here. Again, thank you, Judd. Thank you to the SGA team. It's a real pleasure to be part of this. So couple of things that I'll be covering today for the attendees prior to taking questions and prior to handing it over to Angie. Just a little bit about ANG, who we are, some general information about renewable natural gas, its benefits, and how ANG and other providers of RNG can help customers meet their goals through adoption of renewable natural gas. So American Natural Gas, we are a industry leader in the CNG market. The company was founded just about 10 years ago, and we provide compressed natural gas to the heavy-duty vehicle market. Since we were founded about a decade ago, we have grown pretty rapidly. We've been very fortunate to reach the level of success that we have, and we now operate in 17 states, own and operate 60 stations, just about 60 stations. So one of the things that I'll mention as we go here is we've actually, to keep this a little bit interactive, we've added a couple poll questions in the presentation, just to get some opinions in terms of RNG and its deployment. So you see here, this is the station map for ANG. As I said, we fuel just about 200 fleets, including several Fortune 100 companies and large third-party logistics providers. We are constantly receiving inquiries from around the country in terms of folks who are interested in deploying compressed natural gas or RNG. So the first question that we wanted to pose to the group was, in your experience and in your opinion, which state offers the most potential for CNG infrastructure expansion going forward? And you have 4 options here, and this is not to mean that the states that are not included in these 4 options are any less of a great opportunity for CNG and RNG. But we are receiving a lot of inquiries emerging from these 4 states. One of the things that we're really fortunate to be able to do is help fleets transition to CNG. We understand and we've experienced that that familiarity may be low, so we work in partnership with fleets to spec trucks and to work with dealers, development maintenance routine, train drivers, and assist in route planning and any other support we provide. So that's one of the roles that ANG has. But let me pause right there and check in on that poll question.
All right, we have our feedback from the audience, and we are now sharing the results. They are on your screen.
So these results are really interesting and really align with a lot of what we're seeing in the market. I will say, and we'll touch on this a little bit in a few minutes, but you know, one of the interesting things about the California market as it relates to RNG is the existence of the low carbon fuel standard there. That is a market mechanism to promote the deployment of alternative fuels, not just RNG, but electrification, ethanol, and other fuels. And so, you know, there's a lot of activity in California. Certainly, a ton of opportunity and activity in Texas. We're fortunate in that regard that ANG has a pretty good footprint down there in Texas. So, you know, more recently, our focus really has expanded to be more so on helping customers achieve their emissions and sustainability goals. And we do this primarily by rapidly expanding the amount of renewable natural gas that we flow to our stations and therefore to our customers. And there's a tremendous amount of interest and passion out there by fleets, either private fleets or haulers, third-party logistics operators. We're receiving really a lot of interest from the market. On the other hand, there's a lot of customers that we work with that are unaware of the availability and, more importantly, the benefits associated with renewable natural gas. So we really focus a lot of resources into promoting renewable natural gas and educating the market on what it is, how we can provide it, the benefits in terms of the economic benefits, but also the environmental benefits. So let me just spend a few minutes doing just that. I'll move pretty quickly because there's a lot, and I could probably spend all day talking about this. So, you know, just very quickly, you know, what is renewable natural gas? So sometimes referred to as biomethane. Renewable natural gas is a pipeline quality fuel. It's produced by capturing waste methane emissions from biological waste, right, generated by the decay of organic matter under anaerobic conditions. It's called renewable natural gas because that's exactly what it is. RNG producers take waste material from agricultural sites, landfills, wastewater treatment facilities, food waste, and turn it into fuel. When it's used as a transportation fuel, it has an added benefit of displacing diesel, which is far worse from an environmental and health perspective. And then when it is renewable natural gas, you have significant additional benefits just based on the fact that you're avoiding emitting methane into the atmosphere, which is a much more potent greenhouse gas. So our second poll, and again, just curious in terms of the awareness and interest in RNG. So where is the majority of RNG sourced from today? And we'll see that poll question pop up in just a minute.
All right, the poll is up and available for the audience to give their feedback. And so we see that they are voting. We'll go ahead and give you a few seconds to get your responses in before we share the results. All right, just a couple of more seconds. We see that many of you are actively entering your feedback for this question. And we will go ahead and close the poll and share the results.
And that's right on. I mean, from our perspective, absolutely, landfill gas historically has been the largest feedstock and largest source for renewable natural gas. The movement in the market, though, however, recently has been certainly towards agricultural waste, particularly dairy farms, and other manure sources of feedstock. So that's great to see that the results of that poll. So one last slide on RNG. Just wanted to describe a little bit more in terms of the process of producing RNG, because there's a key step in this process that is necessary in order for RNG to be distributed around the country via the natural gas distribution and transmission system. And so we call this farm to truck. This is the process that we use to deliver fuel to our customers. It starts with organic waste. We seek out organic waste from agricultural sites because it has the greatest sustainability benefits. That agricultural waste, organic waste, is then processed in an anaerobic digester, which creates the methane. That methane has some byproducts associated with it, depending on the feedstock. And so that unconditioned gas then goes through a conditioning step, which then cleans it up for it to be pipeline quality gas. And then it's either diverted to be used on site at the farm itself, or municipal use in a community, or then into the pipeline system, and then to our stations and into the trucks that we are fueling. So last poll question on this. In terms of what we call cow power, which is the RNG that is derived from dairy manure, cow power alone has the potential to make up what percent of all current use natural gas in transportation?
All right, the poll is up for the audience to vote, and they are submitting their responses. So we'll give them several seconds to go ahead and enter their feedback on this question. All right, and responses are coming in across the board on all of these options here. So we'll give you another 5 seconds to submit your feedback. And we will close the poll, and we are now going to share the results. And the results are on the screen.
All right, so again, spot on answer. I think what's notable here is that, you know, a single feedstock, which traditionally hasn't been the major feedstock for renewable natural gas, is already capable of supplying a fifth of all the RNG that natural gas vehicles is currently using. And from our perspective, from what we're seeing in terms of the analyses that we're doing and modeling that we're seeing, is that will only go up as more and more demand drives RNG projects to be developed. One last point here on that. So the growth of RNG has been really significant, and these are statistics from the Natural Gas Vehicles Association. And as you can see, there's been a tremendous amount of growth in the RNG market over the past 5 years. In 2019, 40% of all road fuel used by natural gas vehicles was RNG, which is fantastic. And you can just see that trajectory continues to go up. So why is this happening? From our perspective and the perspective of our customers, it really has to do with the benefits associated with renewable natural gas. And there's really three categories of benefits that we see: economic benefits, health benefits in terms of air quality, and then certainly climate benefits. In terms of cost, ANG provides RNG to its customers at no premium relative to non-renewable CNG. That's something that is a priority for us, because we want to maximize the access that our customers have to renewable natural gas, because our focus is so much on helping customers reduce emissions and meet their sustainability goals. So as a fuel, renewable CNG provides pretty compelling economic benefits. Compared to diesel, there's two benefits really. Number one, just in terms of the spread versus diesel. Over the past 10, 15, 20 years, the average spread between CNG and diesel has been $1 or more over time. What this graph shows that. What this graph doesn't quite show as much as we've seen over a longer period of time is just the volatility in terms of diesel prices, because diesel follows petroleum. Petroleum, being a global commodity, is exposed to a significant amount of volatility. With natural gas being a purely domestic resource for the United States, it's amazing how flat CNG retail prices have been over the last 10, 15, 20 years. And certainly, as you can see here, just in the last 9 or 10 years, it's hardly moved. So that's a really significant advantage for our customers. Obviously, fuel for logistics operators, fleet operators is a really significant expense, and to be able to have that price certainty over a period of time, either purchasing retail or through an agreement with ANG, is a real benefit. In terms of payback, given the fact that a CNG vehicle does have some premium over a diesel vehicle, the economics there are really compelling as well. We model out the economic scenarios for our customers regularly. There is an incremental cost, as I mentioned, between a diesel Class 8 vehicle and a CNG Class 8 vehicle, driven primarily by the CNG fuel system. But because the fuel cost is much less, and frankly, what we're seeing recently with the latest technology, the maintenance costs are beginning to be lower than diesel. We're seeing paybacks around 2 to 3 years, sometimes less, depending on where those trucks are operating. So it's a really compelling economic argument to make in support of CNG and RNG. Moving on to the environmental benefits, and I know this will come up again in the next part of the webinar in a few minutes. First of all, it's just good to highlight the fact that in terms of emissions benefits, CNG produces more than 20% less emissions on a per unit of fuel basis than diesel. When you're talking about RNG, renewable natural gas, with medium and heavy duty vehicles, the emissions impacts are really significant depending on the feedstock. And again, I mentioned it earlier, methane is between 20 and 30 times more potent of a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. And so when you're using methane, RNG in a vehicle, you're avoiding 30 units carbon dioxide equivalent and trading that for 1 unit of carbon dioxide and using that in the engine. So again, dairy RNG actually has a negative carbon intensity, which means when you use that fuel, you're actually removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, which makes it the cleanest transportation fuel in existence. Cleaner than electrification, using grid power, and any other alternative fuel that's available, which is a somewhat unknown fact about RNG. But when it's used as a transportation fuel and when it's food waste or dairy waste as the feedstock, you're removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and it's the cleanest fuel you can use in a vehicle. So that's a pretty impressive fact about RNG. Lastly, public health is one category of benefit that you don't hear a lot of folks talking about. But there are many jurisdictions in the United States that are starting to really reduce the allowable amount of emissions that cause respiratory problems in their communities. And you're actually seeing low or zero emission zones in certain cities. And the reason for that is the largest contributor of poor air quality that's causing bad health outcomes is transportation emissions. And the largest problem within transportation emissions are diesel fumes in the form of particulate matter. So this is actual solid and liquid particulates, carbon that are emitted because of incomplete combustion of diesel fuel, and then nitrous oxides. The impact of particulate matter and NOx is pretty significant. It can cause respiratory ailments, cardiovascular ailments, and so when you look at CNG and renewable natural gas in place of diesel, you're looking at benefits in terms of from an air quality standpoint of 99% less particulate matter than diesel. There's only trace amounts of particulate matter from CNG and virtually no NOx emissions whatsoever. And then also 90% less, which is 90% less than the allowable federal limit. So the last thing I will touch on before I hand it back to Judd is just how ANG, how we help our customers meet their goals. And it first starts with our commitment to ensuring that our customers have an absolutely exceptional fueling experience. And we do that by taking a very catered approach, working with our customers. There is no customer that is the same than another, and so we really go out of our way to try to work as a partner with our customers to make sure that we can do everything in our power to help them meet their sustainability goals. Some fleets are very familiar with CNG and don't know that much about RNG. And so there's an outreach component of our work every day where we're doing webinars like this, but just picking up the phone sometime and calling up our customers and letting them know, what those benefits are. Finally, the last thing I'll talk about is the additional sort of value add support that we provide to our customers. And one of those things is to provide regular monthly reporting to our customers on the impacts of CNG and RNG specifically on their vehicles and on their operations. A lot of fleets, and you're going to hear about an absolutely fantastic example of this in just a few seconds. A lot of fleets have established really nation-leading targets in terms of emissions reductions and sustainability. And a lot of those companies and fleets are recognizing that, number one, CNG is a proven technology. There is no technology risk. And number two, when you introduce the use of RNG along with CNG vehicles, you have a very attainable and very, very impactful opportunity to reduce a significant amount of emissions. And that has meaningful contributions towards companies being able to achieve their sustainability goals. So I'll stop there. I appreciate everyone listening today. And again, thank you to the SGA team. And I will turn it back to Judd.
Brian, thank you very much. Very insightful, a lot of great information there. I'm sure there'll be questions for you. We'll hold those for the end, but thank you for being with us today. Now we'll have the opportunity to hear from one of those customers that you talked about, Brian. We'll hear from Angie Slaughter. She's with Anheuser-Busch. Angie is the Vice President of Sustainability, Logistics, SVC, and Capabilities Procurement at Anheuser-Busch. During Angie's time with the company, spanning more than 20 years, she's held several roles within the operations and procurement, dedicated to driving transformational change to ensure Anheuser-Busch remains an industry leader in sustainability. Angie received her bachelor's degree in chemical engineering and a master's degree in environmental engineering from the University of Illinois and is a licensed professional engineer. Angie, with that, we'll turn the time over to you. Thanks so much.
Good morning, and thanks, Judd. Also coming to you from St. Louis, Missouri, our home offices and the home of Budweiser. So as Judd mentioned, my name is Angie Slaughter. I'm the Vice President of Sustainability and Logistics Procurement at Anheuser-Busch. And I just first want to say on behalf of 18,000 colleagues here in the US, I'm really honored to be here today to share a bit on our goals around renewable natural gas, but also our partnership with ANG and how this fits into our broader green fleet strategy. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Anheuser-Busch, we represent the North American business unit of AB InBev globally. And as America's leading brewer, we operate in more than 100 facilities across 27 states and produce more than 100 different beer brands here in the US. So we are a large company. We also have massive economic impact and reach that really helps us drive sustainability in our supply chain. If you look at the last 10 years, we have purchased about $70 billion in raw materials, commodities, goods, and services in the US alone. And this provides us the ability to really shape change in our supply chain and use that scale for good. So on the logistics side, nationally, we travel over 350 million miles every year if you look across all modes of transportation in the US to deliver beer to market. And again, with this scale comes great responsibility to drive action in our industry. And the last point I'll make on this slide is, as you can imagine, beer is a very natural product. And so people have been enjoying beers for thousands of years. And we as a company want to ensure a sustainable future where people continue to enjoy beer for years to come. So if we go to the next slide. What is the business case for sustainability? I would say there are several compelling reasons to pursue authentic sustainability initiatives and to set ambitious goals. Several here are listed on the slide: consumer demand, impact on reputation externally as a company, of course, operational efficiencies and savings for the business, and then investor interest. And we're seeing much more on the investor interest side. And lastly, top talent attraction as we look to recruit new talent into our company. So one area I want to go a little bit deeper on, if we back up, is consumer demand and expectation. Consumers are really becoming much more focused on sustainability. They want to buy products from responsible companies. Some stats are listed here on the slide. But we do, as a company, believe that this drives what we would call to be a mega trend in our industry called purpose-driven brands. And we want to be able to use our brands to speak to our consumers and engage with them essentially on our sustainability goals. So next, what are our sustainability goals? At Anheuser-Busch, we do take great pride in our efforts, and we have a long history, I would say, of environmental stewardship. So in 2018, in April of 2018, we reaffirmed this commitment with the launch of our 2025 sustainability goals. And these goals are essentially designed to contribute to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals to build resilient supply chains and productive communities, as well as a healthier environment for everyone. They're focused in on these four main pillar areas that you see on the slide, where we really as a business have what I would say the most impact, and we have focused partnerships to drive meaningful change. In this case, throughout our supply chain, these are all externally focused. And the four areas are water stewardship, smart agriculture, renewable electricity and carbon reduction, and circular packaging. So Brian mentioned from farm to truck. We like to refer to this as from seed to sip. And we recognize very clearly that sustainability is so important for our business. When you think about beer, again, we are very dependent on high quality water, sustainable supply of agricultural materials, and we really have an obligation as a company to ensure that we're reducing our carbon footprint, as well as putting responsible packaging into the market for our consumers. So if we go to the next slide, of our four goals, really the one that is the most relevant for today's conversation is our 2025 carbon reduction goal. Here we committed to reducing carbon across our entire value chain by 25% by 2025. And sustainable logistics plays a very key role in reaching this commitment. We also know and understand that more than 80% of our footprint comes from our supply chain, completely outside of our direct control. And if you look at the slide, it's essentially everything outside the gray piece of the pie as shown. So we've set an ambitious goal here. It meets the science-based target objectives, meaning in line with the Paris Agreement to limit change below 1.5 degrees C above pre-industrial levels. And because we have more than 40% of our emissions in our supply chain, the science-based target also requires measurement and reporting of Scope 3 emissions, which includes all of our transportation. So today, I believe there are about 450 companies that have approved science-based targets, and we'll continue to work together to reduce throughout our supply chain. So if we go to the next slide, one of the areas where we know we can drive change literally is in the transportation space. Logistics, again, represents about 9% of our carbon footprint, and we've already made significant progress on reducing emissions in this sector just by focusing on routing efficiencies, backhauls or reverse logistics, and ensuring that we are using essentially the right mode of transportation in the first place. But we do have much more planned. So by 2025, we intend to convert our entire long-haul dedicated fleet to renewable powered trucks. And this includes partnerships with Nikola, Tesla, and RNG vehicles. In order to deliver beer in the most sustainable way, we see all these different forms of innovative technology as solutions in our supply chain. And we do expect all of these technologies and fuel sources, including renewable natural gas that we're talking about today, electric and hydrogen, to be complementary as we continue to work towards our fleet and our state of transportation for the future. So we go to the next slide and talk specifically about RNG. The fact is we recognize that some of these innovative solutions may take time to come to scale and to come to market. And we have a commitment to achieve these goals by 2025, which seems like a ways off, but in fact, I think it's rapidly approaching. And with RNG, we have a readily available solution, and we are already making progress to continue to improve the sustainability of our dedicated fleet. So we recently announced that we are transitioning more than 180 trucks in our Houston and St. Louis fleets to renewable natural gas. Again, working with Agility Fuel Solutions, American Natural Gas, and US Gain. And this move for Anheuser-Busch, it represents about 30% of our owned dedicated transportation fleet moving to RNG. So these two fleets, again, in St. Louis and Houston, are expected to travel about 8.5 million miles each year. And by transitioning these trucks within these fleets to RNG, we expect to reduce our emissions again by about 70% compared to conventional diesel, which is the equivalent of taking about 66,000 passenger cars off the road. And in addition to this, we're continuing to evaluate RNG in other locations across the country where our dedicated fleet operates. Let's go to the next slide. When you think about the benefits of RNG, I would group these in 4 key areas. Brian mentioned 3, and really these line up very, very well when you think about environment, health, and really the last 2 on the slide here are reflective of cost. First, relevant for our sustainability goal, again, is the emission reduction or carbon intensity reduction that comes with using RNG versus conventional diesel. As stated earlier, transportation accounts for about 9% of our footprint, and we need to reduce at least 25% across our entire supply chain, including transportation. Second, air quality improvements, of course, with lower NOx emissions and near zero particulate matter. With the use of RNG versus diesel, there are great environmental benefits that come with RNG. The third item is related, again, to pure cost reduction. When evaluating the total cost of operation of RNG versus diesel, there are many variables to consider when you think about equipment costs, fuel costs, subsidies, truck weights, maintenance, and even the resale value of the trucks at the end of life. All of these cost inputs can vary, and it's important as you evaluate that you understand all the variables on both sides of the equation specific to your fleet for that business case. And then there certainly is a benefit in fuel price and incentives for RNG, as mentioned. If you take a long-term view and you look at what you're spending on diesel fuel, we see definite cost benefit just moving from diesel to CNG. And then when you add in the benefits of RINs and the tax incentives for RNG, it really creates what I would say a compelling reason to switch. And then last, and Brian mentioned this also, but you definitely see reduced price volatility and that fuel diversity and of course availability of RNG all supports the business case. So next, if we go a bit deeper on air quality, an opportunity here when we think about the health benefits. A few stats from the International Council on Clean Transportation, and this is pretty interesting. Today, about 11% of the transportation on the road is in the category of heavy-duty vehicles. Now, these same vehicles account for about 46% of the fuel consumption for the transportation sector. And then probably the most impactful is that the same percentage of heavy-duty vehicles accounts for 71% of the particulate matter that contributes to air pollution. So there's certainly what I would say a lot of opportunity here for us to focus on. So if you go to the next slide, just to touch on other areas that we see in the use of RNG and opportunity there, transportation policies. Such as the first example I would point to is the Fixing America's Surface Transportation or FAST Act. Helps us to ensure a level playing field for RNG. RNG equipment is by nature heavier than a diesel truck. So as a beer shipper, our trucks tend to weigh out rather than cube out. So the FAST Act allows us to make sure that we're able to put just as much beer on a trailer hauled by RNG as we would a diesel truck. Additionally, further extending the alternative fuel tax credit, which is set to expire at the end of this year, would greatly benefit those looking to switch to RNG. Confirming the availability of this incentive for the next 3 to 5 years would support RNG market growth and provide a long-term view for those looking to invest. On point 2, of course, as a procurement professional, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we would like to see the technology costs continue to come down with continued development. On point 3 for infrastructure, we do believe there's an opportunity to partner with others to create regional plans and smart investment needed for infrastructure to support future growth. And then lastly, we really need fleet owners, industry, and business to commit to goals to green their fleets. Brian mentioned this too, but Together, we know we can do more, and we, Anheuser-Busch, hope to inspire others simply to set goals around renewables and RNG. So with that, I thank you, and thanks again to Southern Gas Association for the invitation today, and look forward to the questions.
Angie, thank you very much. Very insightful, great comments today. We'll go ahead and open it up for questions now. If you have any questions, there's a box on the side of the screen. You should be able to submit those questions. Just to get the ball rolling, I'll ask a question first, and maybe Brian and Angie, you can answer it together. But you mentioned, Angie, in your remarks that 30% of your transportation fleet, or 180 trucks, in Houston and St. Louis, you intend to convert to renewable natural gas trucks. That's a lot of renewable natural gas, and it takes quite a large facility to do that. How do you procure that renewable natural gas? Is that something ANG helps you with? Where does it come from? Obviously, it has to come through the pipes of many of the local distribution company where you're doing business. But where are you getting that? Are you getting it through marketers? How are you procuring that gas?
Yeah, certainly. I appreciate the question. We have agreements with ANG and US Gain here in St. Louis, but ANG in Houston. So we have long-term contracts directly with them.
Okay. And Brian, how are you? Are you developing RNG projects yourself? Or are you working with other developers? Who are you seeing pull those projects together to actually provide you with that renewable natural gas?
So we're working with project developers, those who have already developed projects and are currently providing RNG to the market, and then also working with entities that are currently developing projects that'll produce RNG in the near term. The way that we are able to provide certainty in terms of RNG supply to our customers is that just in the same way that our customers will enter into supply agreements with us, we'll go ahead and enter into supply agreements with the project developers themselves, and that gives them some level of certainty that there's an off-taker for what's produced at their projects. And I'll just finish by saying, when we have fleets that come to us and express interest in RNG, we'll do the absolute best we can to provide that to them, no matter the size of the fleet or where they are.
Terrific. Thank you. We've had a few questions come in. I'll go ahead and start with the first one. The question came in, are the poll results accurate? Is California the state with the largest potential for CNG? And I think it showed Texas actually had great potential for CNG. Brian, do you want to take that and talk just a little about that?
Yeah, sure. So I did mention the California market. They have a low carbon fuel standard implemented there. There's many other states that are currently evaluating similar policies in their states. And just for folks who aren't familiar with that policy mechanism, an LCFS is it's a market mechanism where the amount of fuel that's used in a state has a minimum level of renewable content in aggregate. And over time, the carbon intensity of that fuel ratchets down. And so if you're on the wrong side of that threshold, you end up being required to purchase credits on the open market. And then if you are a producer of renewable fuels, you are selling those credits essentially into the market and receiving that benefit. So California is a tremendous opportunity for RNG because of that. Texas, in major trucking lanes there, we're seeing Texas as a tremendous opportunity as well. Part of the reason is that there are private fleets located there that have already made the commitment to transitioning to CNG and happen to have a significant presence in Texas.
Well, and I may just add, I know from my own experience that Texas has some, while they don't have an LCFS credit, they do have some great incentives to help fleets purchase CNG trucks that will obviously run on RNG. So I think a lot of states are doing different things to try to help promote the use of CNG and RNG in their states. So, perfect. Thank you, Brian. The next question came in: for supplying RNG at your stations, are you pairing the CNG dispensed with RINs to get the environmental benefits, or are you paying for the actual RNG gas supply through the pipeline to the CNG stations? Thanks. So I think, go ahead, Brian.
So RNG is sold on the natural gas market in the same way that any other molecule of natural gas is sold. And so, in terms of procuring that commodity, in the cases where we have to procure it for our stations, we're just procuring it on the market. In terms of RINs, which are the credits that are associated with the federal renewable fuel standard, yeah, that certainly helps in terms of the economics supporting the RNG project itself.
Terrific. Thank you, Brian. Now a question for you, Angie, that came in. Does RNG impact the horsepower of a vehicle or the life of a vehicle's power plant?
The life cycle or the?
Yeah, so the life of the, if you keep a truck for say 4 years, does it increase the life of the truck? I know they say natural gas burns much cleaner in the engine. Does it increase the life of your trucks? Also, does it decrease the horsepower? I know there's been discussion in the CNG industry around CNG actually decreasing the horsepower of the vehicle. Have your drivers accepted it well, and how are they accepting those vehicles, and are the vehicles running as you hope?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would say that on the front end, when we first went to CNG over 5 years ago, or in 2013, I suppose, at these locations, and now we're converting further from CNG to RNG with the new agreements. But when we first switched, it was an intense. We worked with our drivers on an intense basis to get their feedback, to get the feedback loop, to understand what are the areas that we could improve to make the driver experience as good as possible. And what I would say is, in these 2 locations, we have not seen degradation in terms of horsepower. I think where that is likely more of an issue, or in different parts of the country where you have more terrain that is just simply more difficult. But I know that's a concern, but we intend to and continue to, as we bring in innovative technology to our fleets, we always work in a pilot state with our drivers first and foremost to give the feedback back to the OEMs, back to the fuel providers, back to everyone involved, so that we continue to make improvements moving forward.
Terrific. Thank you, Angie. Another question that came in, does RNG emit as much CO2 as natural gas? Would either of you like to take that question?
Emit as much? It is lower.
Yeah.
I think Brian actually had it on the slide.
Well,
sure.
So both Angie and I are mechanical engineers, so we had to take chemistry at some point in college. So I'll take a shot from a chemistry perspective. So from a molecular standpoint, RNG is identical to natural gas, right? It is primarily methane, CH4, right? So to that extent, the CO2 emissions are would be close to identical. The gas can always have different moisture content and some other constituents that are in there, but for the most part, RNG and fossil derived natural gas will have the same emissions profile.
Yeah, and it sounds like the real benefit comes in the fact that you're capturing methane, which you said was a 20 to 30 times more potent a greenhouse gas than CO2. that's where the real benefit comes in, because once you've generated the RNG, you've cleaned it up, processed it, injected it into the pipeline, it really is just like geological natural gas, isn't that right? And so when it burns, it emits the same the same carbon that geologic natural gas would.
That's right.
Yeah, what I would add to that is you have to consider and look at the life cycle of the gas itself and the carbon impact, not just the pure emissions, but the carbon impact over the life cycle of the gas.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really the huge benefit. And that's why the LCFS credit in California favors dairy or hog waste, food waste, things like that. So to that point, someone asked the question, why doesn't landfill gas and wastewater biogas have a negative carbon intensity? Would you like to take a shot at that question, either of you?
From my standpoint, Brian, you can correct me if I'm not spot on here, but I believe it's just from not burning the methane side of the production from that wastewater. So typical anaerobic digestion, you would emit methane into the atmosphere if you're not burning it, let's say for a fuel. So you're avoiding that, and that essentially gives you, over the life cycle, again, a negative carbon impact when you're talking about the full life cycle of the gas.
Yeah, I mean, again, it really comes down to life cycle and how much methane is being emitted by the waste that would normally decompose, right? And so, on a per unit of waste basis, there's a significantly more methane that is produced by dairy waste or hog waste than you'd see at a landfill. And then there's certainly other life cycle factors like, the emissions associated with processing the waste and processing the fuel that contributes to its overall emissions life cycle profile. And so that's where you see landfill gas still, a tremendous benefit or advantage over in terms of emissions, but doesn't quite have as much emissions benefit from on a per unit basis than agricultural feedstocks.
Terrific. Thank you. We had another question come in. They asked, how long does it take to fuel a truck? Is it similar to fueling with diesel?
From what I understand, I haven't physically filled up the truck myself, but listening and talking with our drivers, yeah, it's about the same.
Yeah, we have we have a pretty serious, consistent fuel performance standard that we use at all of our stations. And the largest fuel systems are 175-gallon fuel systems, and we can top those off from just about empty to totally full between 12 and 15 minutes, which is very similar to fueling a diesel truck.
Terrific. Thank you. So here's a question for you, Angie. They asked, what were your challenges to get this project approved by your senior management? It's some pretty ambitious goals that you've set as a company, and moving forward with this renewable natural gas project, did you face challenges getting your management to approve it, or were they on board from the beginning?
Well, because we have these public goals, we have commitment from our highest levels of our company already. I think the challenge was in creating the business case and looking at the business case was taking a longer term view and making sure that you were looking at the life cycle in the right way, right? All those components that we were talking about that go into the business model, really understanding what you can do and the creative financial accounting that you can put around it, right? Do you buy the truck? Do you do a long-term capital lease? What's your structure look like that your internal finance and tax team will support you on? So I think it's getting the right people involved as early as possible in your company to make sure you have a strong stakeholder engagement for the project itself. And then the other thing I would say that is so important is just the external partnerships, right? We have a number of partners outside just A&G that made this project possible. And so really having those strong partnerships to be able to bring to the table to minimize risk for the project.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Here's a question that came through, and I'd like to hear from both of you on this. I think you'll have some insight for us. The question is, what are the major roadblocks to the expansion of RNG for transportation? Brian, you want to go first on that?
Yeah, okay. So what are the major roadblocks for RNG? So I think that first and foremost, it's awareness, right? It is reducing the perception in the market that because I'm a fleet of a certain size, that RNG is not a possibility for me, or that the cost of it exceeds, it's cost prohibitive for our operation. So I think number one, continuing to educate the market in terms of the economics, availability, and benefits from an environmental standpoint is really, really important. There is a cost factor, of course, associated here, which we can't ignore. The projects, digestion projects at landfills or agricultural sites, they're pricey endeavors. I think from a public policy standpoint, what we've done at the state and federal level in various places has been tremendously helpful in certain areas because it gives some level of longer-term certainty, which then allows those project developers to get financing and have confidence in their ability to attract off-takers. So that's certainly a factor. I mean, the good news, I think, is more and more, again, fleets and companies like Anheuser-Busch are making these public commitments to sustainability, and that just creates more and more demand for things like RNG. So, in the fact of the matter is, yeah, there are some barriers, but we're really optimistic that over time, we're going to be able to overcome whatever's out there.
Terrific. Angie, do you have any insight or thoughts you'd like to share on that question?
Yeah, I would just say, when we think about expanding, it's just what's the most beneficial business case, and it goes back to some of the things we were talking about earlier, and which states are offering the most incentives, and where do we go next? So, I mean, we are exploring and looking at the Northeast, and we are exploring and looking at California very hard. So I think we need to continue to push for those favorable regulations to support RNG, and also, to continue those tax credits that expire this year. Those will help continued growth in the RNG industry. And then lastly, I'd say we as a company, we also just are looking for where physically are the stations that can serve us and serve our operations, so that we have a close footprint with those fueling stations.
Terrific. Well, thank you for your responses to those questions, and thank you for the presentations that you've shared today. We didn't have a chance to get to all the questions. I apologize. There were some great questions that came through, but we appreciate everyone's participation today, and especially you, Angie and Brian, for being with us. Thank you so much for your time. We'll go ahead and turn a minute or so back to Nicole with SGA to take care of a few things here at the end. But again, thank you so much. Very informative. Really appreciate it, Angie. Brian, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judd, and thank you, Angie and Brian, for such a thoughtful presentation today. Thank you to those that attended as well. Just a quick note, we'll be sending an email within the next 24 to 48 hours that will include a link to the recording, as well as a link to complete an evaluation, as we do value your feedback. Within the next week, you'll also receive an email containing your professional development hour certificate. And we ask if you have the opportunity to please join us for our next Natural Gas Take Action Month webinar this upcoming Monday. It's how digital flare mitigation benefits the environment and oil and gas operators. You can register on the SGA website on the events page. And with that, thank you again, Angie and Brian. That will conclude today's program. Have a wonderful rest of your week, everyone.